Hello, and thank you for watching this video. The point of this video is to demonstrate and explain the new filtering technique designed to simplify the selection of hardware items when creating a hardware set. Our customers' hardware libraries can be very large, and therefore we have developed this technique to make it easier to get to a particular item. The new elements of this technique consist of these check boxes above each pull down box for each category of or each property of the item, each attribute. So we have a checkbox next to manufacturer, a checkbox next to category, one next to subcategory, item, revision, and function. What that checkbox says is that to filter the other categories as you move from one to the next by the information that's in these boxes. So if you pick a particular manufacturer and the manufacturer checkbox is on, then you will only see entries for that manufacturer as you move down the line. If you select a particular category and manufacturer and both those checkboxes are on, you will only see entries that belong to that manufacturer in that category, and so on. This works in any direction, and we're going to see that it actually makes for a very fast way and very flexible way of finding items once you understand how to use it. Now there are two new buttons associated with these checkboxes. One is the clear button, which turns them all off, and one is the set button, which turns them all on. Now when I say all, I should say these four: the manufacturer, category, subcategory, and item. We also have checkboxes available for revision and item, but generally by the time you're down to these attributes, you've gotten so specific already that it doesn't make sense to filter backwards on these things. However, there are times when that's not true, which we'll get into, and so we do have these boxes here, and you can click on it in those special cases, which we'll get to. The other new box, the other new button, is the clear button that clears out all the selections that you've made so far on this entry so that you can kind of start from scratch. So let's see this in action. Let's do a typical example, which is also representative of how the system was designed to be used in the past before these checkboxes were put in. So let's choose a customer like Corbin Russwin, and now we see that our categories are limited to only those entries that have entries for Corbin Russwin in this database. And let's prove that that's true. I'm going to clear out all my entries, so that gets rid of the Corbin Russwin. And now when I click in category, I see that there are actually many more categories of hardware items than the ones we just saw while we had Corbin Russwin selected. But if you've selected Corbin Russwin, one assumes that you only want to see those categories that belong to Corbin Russwin. Now let's do one other thing, and that is turn off the manufacturer checkbox. Now we're saying don't filter by the entry that's in Corbin Russwin. So now we see all our categories, regardless of whether Corbin Russwin has an entry in that category or not, because we are no longer filtering by manufacturer. Now, why would you ever want to do that? Why would you select Corbin Russwin and then ask to see a category that Corbin Russwin does not have an entry for? Well, I'm not sure, and therefore these are generally left on. So by putting that back on, we see only the categories that Corbin-Russwin has. And one further note, if there were only one category, it would automatically come up. And we'll see examples of that as we move down. So we'll select lock. And now we see only those subcategories, because both manufacturer and category are checked here. We see only those categories for which that belong to lock and that Corbin-Russwin has entries for. So let's pick a mortise lock, and then we see only those items that are mortise locks made by Corbin-Russwin. We'll pick a 2200. Now, at this point, very often in this process, very often the revision would pop up because it's typical in many cases that there is only one revision for an item. But in this case, there's two revisions, and therefore one doesn't pop up automatically. Now, also, you have the ability to define a revision as the default revision. If we had done that, if, for example, 2006-04 were checked in the hardware item definition as the default, since it's the current one, then that would pop up, and if you didn't want that revision, if you wanted an older revision, you'd have to come in and override that by selecting the 1995-08. But here, since it's neither is since there are more than one, and since neither is defined as the default, we have to select it. And sometimes there's only one function for an item, and in those cases where there is only one function, that pops up automatically. But in this case, there are many functions, and as with the revision, you have the option of defining a function for a hardware item as the default one. If we had done that, if we had said, for example, ML2220 is the default, that would have cropped up. You could have overridden it, but it would have cropped up. In this case, we don't have a default appointed, so we come in here and we select it. And there's our selection.